It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey Not the Face with your host John Nash and your producer me, Steffi Haynes. And today we're gonna talk boxing. We're going to talk about everything from Floyd Mayweather's lawsuit to the Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act. We're going to talk about the sanctioning organizations and Max Kellerman and Dana White, just anything and everything under the sun. But if you want access to all of these things while John is in Las Vegas, you're going to need to get yourself a paid subscription because half of this will be behind a paywall. And you don't want to miss the good half because that's the part that we put behind the paywall. Now, John, you just landed like 45 minutes ago. Here it is, Tuesday, February 3rd, in the middle of the night, and you just landed 45 minutes ago. How you feeling? What's the air quality like? What's going on?
You know how bad the air quality is because I was coughing up a lung when you called originally. So it's I don't know why Vegas' air quality is so bad here. The desert area gets pulling the dust in. But it's going right. I made it to the room. I'm not too far from the courthouse, so I will be there tomorrow. Morning flight was good. Everything's good. I am beat. Just a tiring day.
Tiring day. Well, let's go ahead and get this ball rolling then, because as everyone knows, we always start with antitrust updates. So, have there been any new filings or updates to the antitrust cases?
Well, the big one, which really annoys me, is the judge, which I kind of missed because I was traveling. He put out a notice that if you want to listen to the case, the courthouse, you can file non-party form. If you do that, then they will send you a link so you can listen into the court case. Now, I think 16 people, including myself, I put it in just in case I did not make it in time, put in the non-party request for remote access. And so there will be other people listening in. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, Judge, if you had said this earlier, I could have saved myself the trip, right? I didn't have to take off work. I could have got paid. I could have just done this at home. A lot of stuff. So I am hoping tomorrow, now there's some other filings, so I'm hoping to make up for it that I'm actually here, that there will be a lot of stuff put up on the board because there's supposed to be a lot of visuals so the people calling in can only get the audio, but I will be there and see the documents, hopefully, and the graphs, everything put up on the board. And if you remember the antitrust, the Lee versus Zuffa case, one of the interesting things is if you had listened into one of the hearings, I'm not sure they allowed it, but at the time if you had, you wouldn't have seen a lot of the evidence because they had put out stuff up on the board like the total fighter wage share and stuff like that, which was on the board, but no one mentioned it while they're talking. So me and Paul Gift and Jason Cruz were there just scratching away furiously trying to get all the details. So I'm hoping that's tomorrow, but I am a little peeved with Judge Boulware that he didn't notify me of this days ago or weeks ago before I booked the flight. And I even started my traveling when this announcement was made. But I'm sad to say it was a brief window. So if you missed it, you cannot apply now. It's a very small group of people are going to be allowed to listen in.
Okay. All right. So that's the only update other than, the hearing tomorrow?
That is the only update I've seen so far. There is another filing, but I have not had a chance to. It just went up on Pacer a little while ago today, and it was not available the last I checked. So I'm sure it'll be available right after we finish the show. So that is there's filing wise, that is it. And I guess tomorrow is the big day. Tomorrow we will wait and see if Dana White shows up. I think he will. Everybody seems to assume he is. So I think Dana White will show up. I guess the question is, what questions are he asked and what does he answer? So that will be the big news tomorrow. That's what we wait to see tomorrow.
All right. So let's get down to brass tacks. From here on, it's all boxing. So it was reported just a couple of hours ago by TMZ that Floyd Mayweather is suing Showtime and Steven Espinosa, claiming that they did not pay him hundreds of millions of dollars. What do you make of this news?
Well, I only make what I got from TMZ because I've been scouring, asking people, looking through the internet. I have not seen a complaint yet. And TMZ said this case was filed in California, and I looked at all the courts I could in California, but I haven't seen the filing yet. So I have a question: has it been filed? And it's possible this complaint just got filed or had not yet actually been filed in the court, and it was leaked to TMZ as a news story. That happens. People will sometimes try to get the press out, get a PR win, and leak it to TMZ. But I have not seen the actual complaint yet, so I can only go off what's been reported by TMZ. And it's kind of a head scratcher based on what they say. Now I don't know. We've had Stephen Espinoza on the show, but I don't know him that well, and I've never talked to. At least I don't know. I don't think I've ever talked to Al Heyman. Maybe he secretly was standing next to me sometime, and I never realized it. But I've never spoken to him, the best of my knowledge. So I don't. It's possible. Anything's possible that they could have, ripped off Floyd Mayweather, but based on the TMZ report, I do have some questions about this suit. And namely, the first one is it doesn't name Al Heyman as a defendant, right? It names Showtime and Stephen Espinoza as kind of having this basically enabled Al Heyman to not pay Floyd Mayweather. And that's a little, I have some questions about that because one is Showtime and Stephen Espinoza, they don't have a fiduciary responsibility to Mayweather, right? And so the indispensable party to this supposed crime would be Al Heyman, and he's not named in the suit. So if he's not named, I mean, it seems very likely to me, or based on conversations I had with attorneys when I asked about this, that you could file a motion to dismiss for failure to name the indispensable party to the suit. So that's the first one. That's very strange that Al Heyman's not being named. Second is I'm not sure what the complaint to Showtime is that they're sending money to an Al Heyman account. It would only work if, I guess the only way that would work as a crime is if Mayweather did not know it's going to that account. It was being sent to account without his permission. But I mean, based on everything we know about Mayweather, he seemed to track every penny. He seemed to know where the money was going, right? So it seems unlikely that whatever account it was being sent to, that Mayweather would not sign off of. In fact, I'm pretty sure, based on my understanding of like HBO and Showtime, how they function, their corporate level, it would be necessary for they would only send a check to where it was approved by the boxer. At least that's my understanding. So again, that raises some questions. I mean, it's maybe money was being sent to an account without his permission, but it just seems unlikely the way the business works, especially at the HBO Showtime level. And so I have questions about that. And the big part I question is, we had stories recently about Mayweather being broke, having financial troubles, and he's running around with this advisor he has, Yona Reknitz, I think is how you pronounce his name. And if people want to know what this guy's like, just look up Yona Reknitz. It spells his name Jonarechnitz. Type that name in and then like Southern District Court, and you will just get a long list of scams he's been accused of, charged with. I think there's a quote somewhere in there that he is the most compliant person we've had in our court. Some judge said that because he's been in there so much, pleading with the court. So he does come across as a very questionable figure to be hanging around with Mayweather. So, I mean, again, until I see the complaint, until I see what it actually is, I can't judge. Maybe there's more to it. But based on the TMZ report, based on what we know of the industry, you can't help but think that maybe this is just a desperate attempt to get some money back because Mayweather is broke. It's the fight business, so it is possible he's been ripped off somewhere along the line. But again, the question that comes to my head, the thing that makes my spidey sense go off, is this Reknitz being involved with Mayweather, and just the nature of this complaint just seems a little bizarre. Reported by TMZ, the actual complaint, again, we haven't seen yet. So it's interesting time. We'll have to wait and see, but it strikes me as Floyd Mayweather perhaps desperate to get some money back.
You keep saying money back. They don't owe him any money, in my opinion. Well, as you said, at the corporate level.
Yeah. Again, I'm not. saying money back from those guys. I'm saying money back from money he just blew.
Oh, yeah.
Possibly. I mean, his financial planning does not seem well founded. His number, apparently, he was flying 2 private jets with multiple crews. I don't know if that's true, but that seems. You always talk about how could you make so much money? If you make that much money, you would never lose it all. But, keeping numerous, massive mansions and flying multiple private jets, that's not a frugal person right there.
His obsession with jewelry and his obsession with toting around bags and bags of huge amounts of cash and then, handing it out like it's candy. He makes boneheaded decisions. He's made a boneheaded decision with his financial advisor. You don't even have to type Yona Reknitz's name in and with the Southern District. Just type his name in and look at all the articles that come up where he's ripped off multiple celebrities and things like that. There's so many accusations flying around this guy. And there's so many articles that talk about him basically scamming everyone to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. So what's to say that he's not scamming Floyd too?
I mean, it's possible, and it's kind of my idol now, considering how much he scammed people. I have to put out the caveat, just the thing, until we see the complaint, until we see more evidence, I don't want to say that there's, Floyd doesn't have a case, but based on what we've heard from TMZ, based on relationship directness, just based on Floyd's previous stories about his financial straits, it does make me suspicious of this complaint.
Indeed. Let's move on, because we have seen an interview with Dana White where he says that his boxers will be able to compete for the Zuffa boxing belt and the Ring Magazine belt. Do you think that can happen under the current Ali Act protections?
Well, under the current, no, because under the current, technically, Zuffa could not have their own title. Now, I should say, honestly, Zuffa could issue their own title right now. And maybe nothing would happen because no one at the government level, the attorney generals, ABC, are not enforcing the Ali Act. The concern for Zuffa boxing would be when they conduct events in the United States, they're using United States contracts, holding events in the U.S. If they did issue the Zuffa boxing title, then it would be up to the boxer. They would be susceptible to an accusation of violating the Ali Act by the boxer, because a boxer could then choose claim a right of private action here. And so that's the risk. So under the current Ali Act protections, I mean, no, they shouldn't be able to, but it's possible they could issue a title and the fighter just wouldn't care. In fact, that's one of the, when people talk about Al Heyman, like, oh, he always violated the Ali Act, and they're, and I have no clue because the case was sealed and, and there was a settlement about all the allegations. Did he potentially violate it? Well, maybe he did, but one of the problems they have is, the Ali Act doesn't protect other promoters. Promoters cannot bring Ali Act charges against another promoter. They have no right to do that. Boxers have to. And at the time, all Heyman's boxers were fairly happy with him. And so none of them brought a charge against him. And so that's a possibility here where, the Zuffa boxing issues their own belt and none of the fighters care. So that's, maybe that happens, but I think they're concerned enough about it that they want to pass a new amendment to the bill. So I think that's why they're not going to issue it until the bill gets changed. And so that's a long way to say under the current Ali Act, technically they couldn't do it, but if they did, it would be up to a boxer to challenge it.
Are there other ways to skirt that?
Well, I mean, it depends on what you mean skirt. One is if everything was held overseas, of course, the Ali Act doesn't apply. So that's one possible way to skirt it. The other thing is we have a question about the Ring Magazine title right now. Now, Ring Magazine is technically not a sanctioning organization. They're not a sanctioning body. They don't charge a fee. But when we had Kurt Emhoff, he kind of pointed out Ring Magazine traditionally has complied with a lot of the requirements under the Ali Act. And one of the things Ring Magazine does, at least traditionally, is they make their ratings are not limited to one promoter. Remember, that's one of the requirements of the Ali Act, that they have to be objective ratings that they're not exclusive to any promotion, so that the boxers listed can be signed to any promoter, any manager, whatever, and still be rated. And Ring Magazine traditionally has done that. So on the Ring Magazine part, perhaps, perhaps they can continue issuing Ring Magazine titles as long as they don't make the title exclusive. The problem I have with that is, you would think if their plan really was to take over boxing, that Ring Magazine at some point would say, we're going to make our titles exclusive to Ring Magazine events, promotions, ring promotions, and only fighters that sign with Turki Al-Sheikh can have the title. But that technically would be a violation of the Ali Act, because again, it no longer would the ratings just be objective and open to everybody. They would be exclusive to one promoter, and that'd be a violation. So I guess theoretically, the way they can kind of skirt this for Ring Magazine is, for issuing the Ring Magazine belt, is make sure they don't make it exclusive. And maybe they'll continue doing that in the future. Maybe Ring Promotions will never be a UBO. Zuffa Boxing, on the other hand, I think they could skirt it as well if they said the Zuffa Boxing title is not exclusive and there's no fee involved, there's no money being transferred between parties. But that defeats the purpose of Zuffa Boxing, where they want it to be in-house. So I don't think they're going to do that. So it's not really skirting it, but it is possible that Ring Magazine can just continue operating the way they do.
What happens if the Revival Act passes?
Well, that's interesting, because it depends on what we think Zuffa Boxing is going to do with Ring Magazine, with the Ring title. If Zuffa Boxing passes, then they're allowed to have a title. The Ali Act amendment, the Revival Act, the Ali Act Expansion Act, as Nick Khan likes to call it. If that is passed, then the UBOs are permissible. Zuffa Boxing have their own title. They can have it exclusive to their fighters. Only their fighters can fight for that title. They can use the coercive contract provision then to say, hey, you have to sign with us long term if you want to fight for the title, things like that. So that's what's going to happen with Zuffa Boxing. And then comes up the Ring Magazine part. If Ring Magazine now, the Ring title, Ring Promotions, whatever they're going to call it, Turkey's group, if they decide to make themselves a UBO, which a lot of people assume they're going to do, if they become a UBO and have their own title that's exclusive to them, well, okay, then that opens up a can of worms, because if you read the Ali Act, the new Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act, the expansion, the amendments they have to it, it says that a UBO, when the matches involve UBO fighters and a UBO event, if at those matches they're exempt, they don't have they're in compliance with the Ali Act. So the Ali Act doesn't apply. But if you're working with Riyadh season, now the Sella and Zuffa Boxing, TKO, I should say, own Zuffa Boxing together, right? They both own it. But Zuffa Boxing is a separate legal entity from Ring. They're not the same company. And so it would be technically a co-promotion if they work together of some sorts, or a leasing of your fighters, or allowance of your fighters to work there. In which case, theoretically, based on the UBO, the way it says, those fighters are not fighting under the UBO. And so the Ali Act comes into play, right? So the Ali Act would apply to a fighter that had a Zuffa belt going to fight for the Ring title, which means, theoretically, if you follow the bill, it seems, at least it seems my reading, is they could not use coercive contracts. They'd have to follow the Ali Act at that point. And so that opens up, kind of a can of worms there. Is that what the UFC and Riyadh season want? And so maybe it's possible that Riyadh season, their whole plan, or for Ring Magazine, I should not say Riyadh season, but Turki Al-Sheikh for Ring Promotions and Riyadh season, is not to make it a UBO and just keep the Ring title the way it is. But then that gets to the point is, well, then that allows for other parties outside Zuffa boxing and, and ring to capture the title. So if they're trying to monopolize it, it makes it a lot harder to monopolize the sport. So it opens up a lot of can of worms here. It opens up a lot of questions of how they're going to do it. And so I'm curious how they're going to do it, right? Possibly what they do is make the fighters sign with both Zuffa boxing and ring. And so they're under contract with both companies before they do these events, so that they are basically in compliance as UBOs with the Ollie Act, and they don't have to worry about it. Maybe that's what they get around it. But they're going to have to find some way around it, or because as the way the bill is written, you would possibly open yourself up to a right of private action by a boxer, because if you did that sort of co-promotion between the two events, suddenly the Ollie Act is back into play.
I got a question. If the boxer was made to sign with both promotions, which one would supersede the other? And would their terms, the length of the term, be concurrent with one or the other? Or would it follow? Like you have to serve out this term and then you serve out your ring term. Yeah, how would that even work?
I don't know, because one of the implications, one of the implied things is that the UBOs are exclusive. That's what they want, but it doesn't really demand exclusivity. But remember that the amendment that they added approved that there's a 6-year maximum to the contracts, and so you would think that those contracts would run simultaneous, but there's also require about the minimum number of bouts if you're under contract to a UBO. So if you're signed to both of them, do you have to, do you have to provide not just the fight every 5 months? Now is it every 2.5 months, so that each UBO can be in compliance? Maybe it's a possibility too that Riyadh season. I'm sure the workaround will be that if you're in Zuffa boxing, let's say for a long year exclusive contract, and then they let you sign with Riyadh season to fight for the Riyadh season, the Ring Magazine belt. Maybe you sign for 1 or 2 fights only, and then there's an extension if you win the title, a long extension for that. But I mean, theoretically, if they did that, the fighter could argue and say that was a coercive contract. The only way I was going to get a Ring Magazine title was to sign with them as a UBO, and since I wasn't signed with them yet, I was already signed with Zuffa Boxing. The Ollie Act should apply. So I'm not quite certain how this will work, because the whole concept of UBO is the kind of the UFC model is you never co-promote.
Okay.
And so I have to almost assume and start thinking that their plan is to not use Ring's title the way we thought they were going to use it. They're going to use it as an in-house title that only their boxers could fight for in the future. I have to think that perhaps they're thinking we're going to keep Ring the way it is, and it's just a way to rub some shine on our Zuffa boxing star. But at the same time, that also kind of defeats the purpose. If you're trying to build up Zuffa boxing as this major entity and take over the sport, you'd think you'd want to have the Ring Magazine fighter in-house, locked into house, and this doesn't do that.
Let me ask you this. It seems, now I'm not sure if this is what's happening, but it definitely gives the optics that Zuffa Boxing is managing and promoting Callum Walsh. Is that what's happening? And if so, how are they getting around that?
Well, they kind of are. I mean, that's one of the things they're asking for in the Zuffa boxing, or not the Zuffa box. Well, we should call it the TKO bill, the RE bill, right? Mm-hmm. Is there's some carve outs that make it more likely that a promoter, even though it technically says there's still somewhat of a firewall in place under the bill that you can't compensate a manager, it gets rid of the full firewall. And so you can, in many ways, operate as a manager, as a promoter, as a UBO. Now, in this case with Callum Walsh, it does look, and there's a simple trick they could have done to continue, because managers can actually promote boxers under the current Ollie Act. The thing is, they have to be 8 rounds or less fights. They cannot be 10-round fights. And the reasoning for that, the whole argument when they did it, is because some fighters can't get fights. And so the promoter to build up a fighter would actually pay for his opponent, pay to put on an event, to get them the experience, to get them a rated opponent, whatever, to build up their career, to progress. And so they said for lower level fighters, we kind of have to let managers operate as promoters because that's the way the system works. And so they put it, but for championship level, that's where they said that's where the firewall should be, because that's where the monopolization of the weight classes happen. So we're going to put a firewall in 10 rounds or above. And so that'd be one way to get around it. The thing is, though, they are having Calum Walsh fight in 10-round fights, in 10-round bouts. And so all the act right now applies to Calum Walsh. But we have to get back to that thing I said about Al Heyman. I mean, I guess we could probably argue that the promoter is operating as a manager for him, but the person that has the standing to complain and take this to court is Calum Walsh. He's the fighter. The Ollie Act protects fighters. Outside parties can't suddenly go, oh, we don't like this situation. You are violating the Ollie Act. We, as another promotion, as just fans, media, whatever, we can't file a lawsuit or complaint. Theoretically, the attorney general could, but they never do it because they don't care. The person that would have to file a complaint is Calum Walsh. And you look at it, would Calum Walsh sue Zuffa Boxing for violating the firewall between manager and promoter? I don't think so, because I think he's getting a pretty good deal, right? He's getting a better deal than he would with any other promoter, any other manager. If they were, because Zuffa Boxing is turning this guy that most people agree is, good, but nothing really special, is being treated as very special by Dana White and Zuffa Boxing. And so in his situation, he is probably looking at it going, you know what, maybe if I was a bigger name, maybe if I was Shakur or Haney, or someone that's at the top of his weight class, a true top of this top rated guy, Crawford, one of them, maybe I would file a complaint because I'd be upset because I would not want my promoter to be operating as a manager, because it would be going against the fiduciary's duties. Promoters have an adversarial position. Managers have a fiduciary responsibility. Maybe then they would be filing. But if I'm Calum Walsh right now, it's like, okay, they're breaking the Ollie Act, but you know what? I get all the benefits of them violating it because, again, not to be too mean on them, I'm not that good.
All right. Now, let me ask you this. If Saudi Arabia is having all these money problems, and they are well documented now in mainstream media, would Sela be able to inject cash if needed? And the example I'm going to use is the acquisition of big name boxers like Alexander Usyk, because some people have surmised that that's what will happen. But how can that happen if they're supposedly going to tighten the reins really, really, constrictively?
Yeah, that is a big question. I think there's some evidence that they're pulling back, that fights are now moving to the U.S. and U.K. that used to be in Saudi Arabia, but they seem to have some money. They are going to be putting on this Tyson Fury on Netflix event. There's Anthony Joshua before was supposed to be booked on Netflix. I wouldn't be shocked if Anthony Joshua is still booked into kind of just a spotlight fight just to build up for him and Fury later. I know there's a lot of reports that Zuffa Boxing is part of this Joshua fight, or the Fury fight, I should say, Tyson Fury fight coming up. But it sounds to me, based on what I read, is that it's not a Zuffa Boxing event per se. It's Riyadh season. And we already know Zuffa Boxing will often provide the undercard for Riyadh season. So that's probably their involvement, again, their partner. So that's the other part of the operation. You have Zuffa Boxing putting on their events, and I've talked to several people in the industry. It sure sounds like that $100 million deal might be real for Zuffa Boxing, which is pretty crazy that they got $100 million with what they've delivered so far. So the $100 million a year to work with is a lot of money to work with in boxing right now. Especially the type of events, because that what Calum Walsh card, what the total purses was probably $700,000, something in that, under $1 million, I bet you, for the total purses. And so they have plenty of money to work with and save for some of the bigger events. So they're flush with 100 million, and then the bigger events still are being put on by the Ring Riyadh season, for Riyadh season, and for them, TKO seems to have been cut a deal with Netflix for these big fights, and Netflix does pay a large amount, and so those fights might be covered. It's the fights in Riyadh now might be more in trouble, and let's see if they dip into their purses for that. But we've talked about this before. One thing we said, and I guess this turned out to be true, is I said I did not think 12 fights per year is all they're going to put on. I thought they're going to end up putting a lot more. They now seem to be putting on a lot more than 12 fights. I also said I was just thinking this, suspecting that one of the reasons they moved to TKO last year is because they wanted to stop spending so much on boxing. TKO, they know, makes tons of money on UFC, so they went to him and said, "Can we do what you did for UFC for boxing? We'll be partners." And that's why they brought TKO. So I think they have a plan in place to kind of get there. But I think some money has been set aside, but it's being in many ways recouped because TKO is getting deals with Netflix. After Turkey supposedly had a bad experience with his negotiation, maybe they cut Turkey out completely at this time. They're negotiating without him. And they're probably some of the other boxing promoters are struggling with their resources because DAZN is scaling back. They don't have TV deals. So a lot of fighters are probably available. I think they're very smart about who they're choosing. Giopate is not Crawford for Zuffa Boxing. He's not Canelo. They let the Riyadh still pick them up. But Usyk can demand a lot of money, but he is the heavyweight champion, right? And so, that's important because you want him locked up because if someone ever defeats him, then you have the heavyweight champion under contract. So I am sure, that they're looking at this money that they got coming in, looking how cheap some of the events are. And they're like, we can splurge on select few fighters, key guys that we want to put money on for bigger events. And so they're doing that. And at the same time, they still have this Netflix money to be able to put on big events with Riyadh season. And so, yes, it looks like I would have guessed that Saudi Arabia is going to cut back, but there is money out there for them to still put on several big fights a year and sign big fighters for those big fights.
Max Kellerman, he was in a sit-down with Dana White and Ari Emanuel recently where they discussed getting labor costs under control. What do you think that meant?
Well, I think we know what that means. There's only one labor really in combat sports. That's the athletes, the fighters. And so it's sad to say, and I think Max Kellerman has entered this position, that some people just want the fighters to be indentured servants, right? Mm-hmm. That the money they should make, they shouldn't get paid so much because they're just dumb fighters. They don't deserve as much. We prefer, I guess, the people. I guess Max Kellerman's thinking the money should go to the broadcast team. So keep that labor cost down. And again, the funny thing is, it's the labor cost is just not like they're unprofitable. They're insanely profitable. That's how they've kept the labor cost down. But don't pay the fighters much. They don't want the fighters making too much. They want the fighters to have no say in who they fight, where they fight, when they fight. And so they want no control over their careers. So that's why, in many ways, there just seems to be a large number of fans, more and more all the time, that seem to want the fighters to be some sort of indentured servant to a promoter.
To access the bonus content of this episode, you must be a paid subscriber. To do that, go to heynottheface.substack.com and subscribe today.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Okay, the face!